Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Desi Rainbow Parents and Allies community conference call. My name is Aruna Rao. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm the mother of a young adult who identifies as queer and trans. I'm from Bangalore, India, and I now live in the United States. So Desi Rainbow Parents and Allies is a group, a network of parents and allies and LGBTQ folk around the country. We regularly host public calls to bring together the community in the United States specifically. And this is the South Asian diaspora, the Desi diaspora in the United States. And our focus on these calls is to increase awareness and support for LGBTQ people. So people who join us can be LGBTQ people themselves, they can be parents, family members, allies, anybody who really wants to support the queer and trans communities. The call is open to anyone who wants to join us to learn more and to support others. So today I'm really delighted that we have several members of Muslims for Progressive Values, a wonderful organization that does great work in the community. And we're joined by 4 members who are going to be speaking with us on the experience of queer, trans, LGBTQ Muslims and of allies and families. So before we begin, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items. Many of you are going to be calling in into this phone call. If you have any background noise going on, please mute your phones when you're not speaking. We are recording this, and this will be posted on social media. So please be mindful that if you are sharing any information that you're not comfortable sharing publicly, be mindful that this is a public conversation. If you have questions that you prefer not to ask on the call, you can just send us a message on Facebook Messenger or even email us at dcrainbowparents@gmail.com. And if you're on the phone and would like to ask a question, if possible, please introduce yourself with your name, the city you're calling from. It's also okay if you don't want to share this information because we just want to make sure that you're comfortable being here. And as a parent and an activist, I'm still learning how to do this work. So I apologize in advance if I make any mistakes now and in the future, and I hope to do better as I go ahead with this activism. So now I'd like to have the people on the call introduce themselves. Just tell us your name, your pronouns, and the reason that you're joining this call, perhaps a little bit about your background and your family situation if you can talk about that. So, Kandil, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Aruna, for having us on call today. Very delighted to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Kandil Javed. I am chapter co-founder and a co-director for Muslims for Progressive Values Boston. As Muslims for Progressive Values, we advocate for equal human rights, inclusion, and social justice in the U.S. and around the world. Here in the Boston community, I am I'm one of the co-directors, so a community organizer. Preferred pronouns are he, him, his, and a queer identified American Muslim with a Pakistani heritage. Very happy to be here to talk about my experiences.
Thanks, Kandil. Hamida, you want to go ahead? I think you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me now? Perfect.
Yes.
So my name is Hamida Merchant, and I am also a resident of the Boston area. I kind of fell upon this wonderful organization called Muslims for Progressive Values thanks to Kandil. And I work here in a science journal, and I have a sibling who identifies as a homosexual male, and since this happened pretty recently in the summer of last year, I found it important to reach out and find allies more for my own mental support as to how I can deal with being a sibling who has struggled with his identity for almost 40 years of his life, and that's part of it.
I'm sorry. There's a lot of background noise when you're talking.
Oh.
I'm not sure if it's the screen.
I'm using my phone. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Maybe
Is it better?
Can be a little bit closer to your
The static. I don't know. Oh, maybe should I sign on from the computer? Maybe I'll log off and try.
No, that's fine. I just want to be able to hear you. That's all.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, that's slightly better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll probably hold it closer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as I was saying, I have a sibling who identifies as homosexual, and this occurrence happened last year in the summer, and that's what prompted me to seek allies and seek support in the Muslim community with this issue, which I was quite removed from previously, and that's what brings me here today.
Thank you so much. And we have a couple of other people on the call. Nadia, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi.
Okay, I'm still getting a lot of background noise here. I'm not sure.
I don't think it's for me. I'm going to ask that the other callers put themselves on mute for now. So if everyone knows how to do that, if you press the little microphone symbol, I think that will help. That's much better. Thank you. Hi. So, yeah, I'm Nadia Madden. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I also live in the Boston area. I'm a co-director of Muslims for Progressive Values Boston with Kim Deal. And I'm a from home mom. I actually work with the national chapter of Muslims for Progressive Values on grant writing, various forms of fundraising. And I am, I guess I'm an ally, I would say. I'm from a mixed background. My mother is Indo-Caribbean. She's from the island of Trinidad, and we have a big family there. And my dad is, he's Irish and Cuban American. So I really got involved with Muslims for Progressive Values. I've known about the group online for a long time, and I've loved it. It's like, finally, I have a religious community that actually shares my political outlook on life. Since the elections in 2016, I have gotten more politically active, and I felt very frustrated by how homophobic the kind of the mainstream Muslim community, even the activism community, can be. And so I'm really happy to be a part of Muslims for Progressive Values Boston, because I feel like we have a very affirming community. And sort of my goal is to be that that supportive auntie that maybe some our members, our queer and trans members, don't have in their family lives, with hope that we actually can start to change our culture so that they do eventually.
Everything okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Sorry, yes. I'm doing this thing where I'm muting myself too. Adil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Adil Ahmed. My pronouns are he, him. I largely got into this mostly online. It started, but then eventually there was an individual in Edmonton. He's kind of stopped doing activism now, but I used to come with him. He'd invite me, he'd make me speak, or he'd make me help out with events and stuff for the progressive Muslims in Edmonton. I don't know if he was directly involved with MPD, but what happened with me was most of my online outreach was a lot of that stuff. And for me, it was mostly the fact that like I never had much contact with the LGBTQ community, but for some reason, it just bothered me how the mainstream Muslim community kind of, how strongly and how angry they could be at times. So then I came online and I met my friend in Edmonton, and I realized, hey, there's actually a lot of people who are all questioning this narrative as well from the mainstream community. So that's basically kind of my story.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to have allies on from the community, because it's really so meaningful to have people who are willing to put their support behind the community, knowing the kinds of barriers that LGBTQ people face. I did want to ask anybody else who's on the call right now if they have a specific question that they'd like to ask of all the folks from Muslims for Progressive Values who are on the call. If there isn't a specific question, I'd like to go ahead. And one of the things that I have been thinking about for some time is that, you know, a lot of the people that I talk to have told me that it's very hard for people from the Desi community, from the South Asian community, to actually be able to identify their identity in an open fashion because there are no role models, and it's because it's so hard to be able to understand how you identify when you don't have people who look like you or talk like you or in your community who are you know, showing what it is to be LGBTQ. So I'd like to ask all of you if you are identify as queer yourself or if you're an ally, what are the kinds of role models or queer role models that you saw in the community before you actually knew someone who was queer or before you yourself came out? Would anybody like to respond to that?
I don't mind taking a stab at it. So for me, I was completely insulated from the existence of an LGBTQ group in the mainstream Muslim community. I had not engaged with anybody or interacted with anybody who was openly gay or had a different sexual identity than the binary norm that I grew up with. So for me, the role model / person that I actually engaged with for the first time is on this call. It's Kandil, who I ran into in a very, I don't know, weird, coincidental way. And when he spoke to me about MPV, at the time, I mean, sexuality was never a piece of conversation, but I kind of just understood that he is a homosexual, and I met for the first time a man who is a Desi, who is a Muslim, who is a proud Muslim, a practicing Muslim, and is fearless to a huge degree, and turned out that it was someone that I turned to in my time of crisis when my brother came out. And so for me, Kandil has been a role model in terms of leadership for what it looks like to be a proud and gay Muslim, which allowed me to even have the courage to be a sibling and an ally to this community, which I not knowingly or willingly had just stayed out of, because there's really no space created in the mainstream Desi communities per se, be it of any religion, for anybody with a different gender identity or sexuality. So yeah, the role model that I have is on this panel right now.
Kandil, how do you feel about that?
That's very sweet of her. I know it's interesting. So for me, I think that that's very sweet of me. That I'm flattered by that response. So for me, it was not really I didn't really have a role model throughout my teenage years, and it was just something that I thought, okay, I am attracted to the same gender, but there is that is something that is not for me, for the family that I'm raised in. You know what I mean? So I thought that it was not something that was natural. It was not something that was me. That it was not something that I was supposed to do. All of those, and then in my 20s, so I I was always on the liberal side of my faith, but had questioned a lot of things, which is, the involvement of women in the spiritual leadership, LGBT issues, and other progressive mindset. But for the sake of this call, I would like to stay on scope, which is the LGBT issues within the Muslim communities. I started looking up online, and online I found a lot of content, a full lecture series of Ani Zonneveld with Imam Dai Abdullah, who is an openly gay imam in the D.C. area, and then Ani, who is an open imam, very affirming of LGBT communities in the LA, and found lots of programs, events, newsletter, content, videos that really helped me to come into terms with my own identity. So that was my role model, to see Imam Dai Abdullah and Ani Zonneveld.
Kandil, I'm wondering whether you can actually send me some of these resources so I can post them. So for other people, you know, the videos that you're describing. So I'd be glad to do that. Hamida, I actually wanted to go back a little bit to you and ask if you could describe your experience. So as a sibling, you know, as much as you're comfortable describing, you know, what it felt like for you and your family when your sibling came out, and how you, first of all, responded to them, to your sibling, and where you turned for information. You know, what are the kinds of resources available to a family like yours?
So I come from a very small family. My parents have both passed away, and my brother is the only immediate family I have, and he lives in London. So when he came out, he is 42. He was 42 when he came out. And my first reaction was, he called me in tears and said something that he had a confession to make, and if he wouldn't say this to him, he was crying, and he said if he doesn't tell me this now, he will kill himself. And I was like, what? The first thing that came to my mind is, you know, he has some bad disease, or, you know, he's committed some big crime, or, you know, something really morbid. And I sat on my bed and I just said, you know, you can tell me anything. And he says, you have to promise me that you keep loving me. You won't stop loving me. And I said, I can never stop loving you. I don't like you a lot sometimes, but I'll still keep loving you because, you know, you're the only person I have besides my kids, and you're my brother. So then he tells me that he's gay, and my reaction was shut up. And because he was 42 years old, and he tried marriage to a traditional Indian woman. 14 years ago. It didn't work out, and I wondered, now I know why. But at the time, it was just, you know, this whole crazy, I don't know, analysis of what went wrong in the marriage, and blaming and shaming, and, you know, taking sides. And it was just horrendous to you know, reflecting back on it, as to what the poor woman also had to go through, because I'm not sure she's aware even now of his coming out. But when he said that he was gay, I kind of felt this sense of, oh, that's it? And, you know, and he was very angry at my response of taking it so lightly, because I was like, what's the big deal? So this is what you like, and his life, the trajectory of his life has been on a total downward spiral over the past a decade and a half. Yeah, almost more than, yeah. So, and his sexuality has been the reason for that downward spiral, and for me, trivializing this such a big thing, because for me, being in liberal America, in Massachusetts, which is another ultra-liberal haven within relatively liberal America compared to back in India, him being gay was not such a big deal at that moment. But for him, it was something that he's been holding this truth, this earth-shattering truth that he's been holding on to for so long. And my reaction of, this is it? I mean, seriously, this is what's holding you back from achieving your dreams and your goals and holding down a job and, you know, having meaningful relationships and is because you're gay. I mean, that's not a reason, because I have seen gay people achieve and gay people be successful and gay people be happy. And and him, you know, he didn't know how to deal with my acceptance. He was expecting something, some outrage or some crying or some fear. I did not have any of that at that specific moment because I felt that I had to be strong for him. But I almost trivialized it, and that was not how it should have gone. It was the biggest truth of his life that he is owning up at the age of 42. And since we both don't have any parents for the past 18 years, the only person he was protecting me socially with this information was me, because there was really nobody else whose izzat or, you know, he had to hold up. It's usually the parents that, you know, care about these things, that what are we going to tell society, you know, and things like that. But we didn't have that. He didn't have to shield anybody but me from this truth. And he has been doing that for the past 18 years just to shield me from my marriage that ended. And I think that whole me not taking it as seriously as the truth was for him. I mean, it was huge, but at that moment, for me, it was like, oh, it's just homosexuality. I thought it was cancer, you know, and he didn't see it like that. So, and that conversation, I mean, I just like, he hung up the phone and he said, you know, think about everything and, you know, let's talk. I said, you know, just relax. I love you. And we just kind of ended that conversation. And then I called Kandil because he was the only gay man that I knew. And, you know, and I had just met him 2 weeks ago. And the funny part was that I called him and I said, I think the universe sent me your way because it knew I was going to need you. And that's how it happened. And, you know, and since then it's been this weird, it hasn't been that bad. The journey hasn't been that bad. In terms of, like, I'm really not expected to, I live in a different country, so I'm not expected to provide that much of a support in terms of a day-to-day living for him. But I completely went into panic mode and started reaching out to Kandil and said, what can I do to support my brother? Like, do you know any organizations for Muslim gay men in London? And he was like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people and all of this. And I was trying to I went on this information gathering hunt for finding support for my brother who's younger than me. And I'm supposed to be like, you know, his mother figure or whatever, because I'm 3 years older, but I look much younger. And he didn't take it well. He's like, this is not what I want. And I was like, you know, there's dating apps that you can, you know, find a nice boyfriend. And he's like, I didn't come out to you because I need help finding a boyfriend. You know, that's not what I need from you. I don't need like you to tell me what clubs I can go to in London to, you know, feel cool or accepted. That wasn't the purpose. But I just went into this problem-solving mode as to what can I do to make sure he transitioned. But it wasn't his transition. He was already gay forever, so he didn't really need new tools to deal with his gayness. You know, but I was hell-bent on providing him all these online resources for I don't know what I was thinking, but I just was thinking that it's new to him because it's new to me, but it wasn't new to him. And that realization just took me a while.
Yeah. No, everything that you're describing is so familiar for, you know, us family members because, you know, it's this, first of all, I have to say it's beautiful. I know, you know, many times we blame ourselves for our reactions on, you know, what we should have said, should have done at that moment when the person that we love comes out to us. But I think in many ways what you did was perfect. I mean, it was right for the two of you. And as you said, you are, you know, you are the family that you have at this point. And it's a beautiful thing that you were able to, first of all, relate to him immediately accept him. And I know you think of it as trivializing, but I think in some ways that easy acceptance is something that people crave. You know, as you said, it's not cancer, it's not the end of the world. It's just a you know, two siblings being able to share their truth with each other. And so I think you did everything that you had to do. And I love the fact that you're trying to get him dates and figure out how he can be gayer. So that's really a lovely reaction to have. So I'd like to open it up to Nadia and Adil, who are members of the community and who are, you know, essentially leaders in the Muslim community. And I'd like the two of you perhaps to share a little bit about your own experience of either LGBTQ Muslims who have reached out for support to you, or if any way that you have actually worked with families who have trouble accepting either their children or siblings or someone because of what they believe is forbidden or not right. So I'm wondering if you have anything that you could share with us.
Could I go a little bit?
Sure, go ahead.
So I noticed with me, it was more so whenever it would come up on the news, on the TV or something. I'm talking even in the 90s when I was like in high school. My parents would be like, "Oh my God, 49% of people accept this practice. How is this happening?" And they'd say stuff like that. And I would kind of be like, but you do realize that at some point your narrative cannot be correct, that people are just choosing this, and that people are just sinfully doing it because they're deviant, right? And then I realized I didn't realize just how bad the indoctrination was in our community. So I'd have Muslims come up to me, and they would, especially when I started talking towards people for marriage when I was older, some of these girls would come out as like queer, right? And they would see my reaction to it, and I wouldn't care. But then they would have all this guilt towards it. You know what I mean? They'd have all this guilt. And some of them were converts too. That's the strange thing, right? But they felt like they love this religion so much and they love this community, but they felt like there's something wrong with them because their walis and stuff like that they were talking to, the people, their caretakers, quote unquote caretakers. I know it's patriarchal, but you know what I mean? Like their religious guide would tell them that, you know, this is not good. And they were kind of surprised that I'm pretty outwardly conservative unless I'm talking about fiction and creative expression. So they were shocked that I was not horrified. And then I kind of realized that just outsiders coming in who previously accepted their lifestyle are now feeling guilt coming into the Muslim community, and I'm pretty sure probably with some Desi communities as well. I'm not even much of a leader. I do most of my stuff online. I troll the internet most of the time, right? But these are just personal experiences I've had with a couple of mostly women. But with men, I remember there was a friend of mine who kind of admitted he's bisexual. And then when he was talking to me, he seemed like he was so happy he had like a Muslim that he could talk to. And it was kind of it was bizarre to me, the fact that I just realized, as far as we've come, since when I was a kid talking to my parents in front of the TV when they're seeing stats, there's still a huge problem in terms of acceptance among predominantly Muslim people. But again, I'm sure other Desis deal with similar. Yeah, that's basically all I was going to say. So.
Thank you, Adil, and it's wonderful to hear you speak of supporting people, because as I was just saying to Hamida, that first person that you come out to and their response is so critical on how you feel supported by your community and those who you feel closest to. So I think it's wonderful that you have that instant reaction. Nadia, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I think I first started, I started noticing all the homophobia in my family, like especially in my mom. In high school, I went to a very, here in Massachusetts, the schools are very liberal, and we had a gay-straight alliance. And my mom would say these things like, "Oh, it's so unnatural to be gay," and I would fight with her. I was like, "Why do you think that? What?" you know, you're in a mixed race marriage, like a lot of people would say that's unnatural, or you're a Muslim woman married to a non-Muslim man. A lot of people would say that is wrong too. So I always felt like, you know, it wasn't, you know, there's these religious rules that we have, and they didn't feel just to me. And so trying to figure out what really is just has been a part of my journey. And I think one of the things that really brought me along as a, you know, both as a Muslim and as a, you know, woman of mixed heritage was Irshad Manji. I don't know if you know her, but she's a Canadian Desi woman who's a lesbian, and she sort of came out with all these books after 9/11 and sort of, you know, talked a lot about, you know, some of the things she saw as problematic in Islam. And she kind of led me to this whole online community. There was this group called the Progressive Muslims Union, and Ani Donovel, who's the founder of TV, was one of the organizers of that group as well. And so I sort of got to know just a lot of different Muslims online who were much more liberal and more open-minded, and we had more similar understandings of Islam. And I found out that there were scholars who were, you know, who were gay or who were lesbian, who had actually been really looking at our scriptures and looking at how things had been interpreted in different ways over, you know, centuries. And people have had different concepts of gender in Islam. People have had different concepts of sexuality in Islam. And it's, you know, we're in a particular moment today where, you know, which maybe hasn't been the same in the past, where I think Muslims in the West are clinging to very homophobic norms that actually came from British colonialism. So, you know, I sort of have, over time, I've actually met in real life, both through college and through, you know, places like Muslims for Progressive Values, Muslims who kind of feel the way that I do. But it's still the norm. I mean, there's a mosque that I take my kids to because it's really near their school, and they'll give like these I've had to walk out sometimes because they give these very homophobic sermons, and I'm not sure, you know, how do we start to change that at this broader level, like the kinds of attitudes of, you know, that are really very hateful, like that are being propagated. And that's one of the things I think we're trying to do in our activism as well. For example, we have a pledge that we call No Hate in My Faith, and we ask our speakers if they're going to come speak to an event. It's a sort of a pledge where you pledge that I'm not going to have discrimination of any kind, no homophobia, no racism, you know, no misogyny, and I'm going to, you know, as a person of faith, I don't believe in these things, and I'm going to try to do my best to work against them. And so that's a requirement that we're asking people to join with, and hopefully we can all really hold ourselves to in terms of how we're looking at the world and how we're interacting with people. So maybe a little more abstract, but that's mentally, I think that's where I'm coming at from it, because just I feel like if we don't change the structures of how people think, we can't change how people are in the world.
Can I add something to that? I think what Nadia said about different interpretations and stuff and scholarly work, I think we can't underestimate how important that is, because so many people in our community, especially, and this was with myself, like I was like on the verge of leaving my faith because there's just so many things disgusted me at some point. Now I'm kind of conservative again, but not conservative. I don't know how to describe it. But the fact that there's been this monopoly upon cultural traditions that we think are ever never changing, and that are just, you know, this is the one way it is, this is the truth. When really, historically, for instance, there was, you know, even if they weren't 100% liberal, the people who wrote this down did not view it nearly as concrete as we did. And that one revelation changed things for me a lot, and for a lot of other people. And I think that's a really important point that Nadia brought up. I'm done now. Okay.
No, thank you both. And you know, again, this is something that perhaps, you know, for instance, I'm assume that like a parent, you know, when a kid comes out to them, it could be, you know, somebody who's under 18 or an adult. A Muslim parent who hears this, what would their first reaction be based on what they have been taught about, you know, what is acceptable both religiously and culturally? What do you think? What do you think the kinds of barriers that exist in these families are about? Can any of you speak to that?
I think a lot of South Asian Muslim parents, when they hear their children coming out to them, oftentimes their first reaction is to follow it culturally. They don't dig in to do more research. I mean, Nadia and Adil, they brought up a very good point of, you know, true scholars highlighting these issues. I mean, we have a ton of them right now in this time and age. Still a long way to go in terms of family acceptance and inclusion, but if a parent wants to seek out and look for you know, resources and things like that, they can find plenty of resources online. They just have to be open about the idea to understand that I myself, as a certified imam in the state of Massachusetts, I lead prayers, I'm a certified officiant. What people need to understand is that in Muslim communities there is two things, right? There is your faith, and then there is the cultural aspect of it. The faith aspect of it has no obligations to it. You know, we believe that, I can only speak for myself as a progressive Muslim, I believe that, you know, God made everybody, God made all colors of the rainbow. We have a slogan for Muslims for progressive values that we use for Pride and other rainbow or themed event is Allah made every color of the rainbow, which is that if God is the one who created us, why would he create us? Or, you know, God doesn't have a gender, first of all. Why would God create us and then not want us to be in a healthy relationship with our partners? That is the big thing. So a lot of parents, when they think about these things, they need to think about it like, what is the true teachings of peace, salam, come from? Then what is the cultural narrative that a lot of you know, governments or whatnot are following, and what is it that we are following? You know what I mean? So following the faith aspect of it, you would just share more love and acceptance for your children than if you follow the cultural aspect of it, which doesn't even have a concrete evidence. I mean, I come into conversations with people that are more uptight and you know, traditionalist ideologies that want to spread hate but don't understand the impact of it, right? They need to, when I question them and challenge them about the, you know, the actual content that says that you cannot be in a relationship with the same gender, or you cannot be a person identified as non-binary, or a person who is a transgender, where is this content? So they seems to not have an answer. They often just refer it to, oh, this is what I've been told. This is what so-and-so told me. So there's just a lot of that gap of knowledge that exists that needs to be clarified. And among South Asian communities, I can speak from my mom's perspective. Instead of, you know, reaching out to a wider audience, she would just go and ask a friend. And I'm like, how much knowledge does your friend have about the subject matter, you know? So the best advice for Desi parents who has like any gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, asexual, or queer folks come out to them, listen to your child. Your child would tell you the resources. The fact that they have put in the effort to self-accept themselves, they have done some work behind it. And our website, MPV USA, again, we're going to share all these resources, but just Google Muslims for Progressive Values, and we have a full series where a certified imam walks through the existence of these identities and how to accept them. And, you know, they've always existed. It's not like they never existed. They've always existed. But now let's go past that point and actually accept them.
Thank you, Kandil. That is really comprehensive. And I think that's really what I did want to ask, you know, what are the resources available for families particularly? And, you know, I know what you mean about asking your child or your sibling or, you know, whoever your loved one is. But in many ways, I think there's a lot of discomfort with that. Sometimes relating to the fact that if it's a parent, you're not used to thinking of your child as the expert in something. And there's, and obviously there's a very natural discomfort that culturally that we have about, first of all, talking about sexual orientation or gender or anything like that. So many times I've found that reaching out to a peer, as you said, your mom reached out to friends, reaching out to a peer is actually helpful, but it really depends on the kind of information the peer is giving. If the auntie that gets reached out to is really unable to have any concrete information or anything positive to say, it's not a very helpful thing. So I think parents really need to be able to turn to a source that is trusted, that is honest and positive at this time, and that would make a huge difference to their reaction. Because otherwise their reaction is, log kya kahenge, what is the reaction from my community going to be about me and my child? So I think just having these kinds of resources in place, online, in person, if it's a P-flag, whatever it is in the community, for a parent will make a big difference to their reaction. I did want to ask the other couple of people who are on the call if you have any questions for our speakers.
Hi, Aruna. This is Tejinder. Yeah, hi. I'd like to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who's on the panel and sharing your stories and thoughts. I applaud each one of you for your role in the community. And I am a very proud mom of a transgender male child. I have 2 children, a cisgender male and a transgender male. And I love my children, and I have been my child's biggest advocate ever since he came out, and ever since I understood, or at least got to know the word transgender, which I didn't even know what it meant. So we have our story on the podcast, and take a listen to that. Might help you at least to educate some other people. But I just have a couple of comments I wanted to make. Was when we say LGBT issues, that statement actually personally bothers me, because these are not issues. People who fall under this LGBT umbrella are people. They're just like anybody else. And yeah, we say, but bigger issue is really log kya kahenge, this issue, the cultural issues are the real issues. When Khadil mentioned about how, the mom went to somebody else to see what is their reaction, I went through that where and maybe it just subconsciously happened, and I'm so grateful that it happened with me, is that I started to, educate myself as well as talk to the gender specialists and all that. And then I painted the picture to the closest people to us, whether they were close neighbors or friends, one at a time. And I painted the picture like, this is what it is. I don't know all about it, but I just want to convey that to you. I was not looking for their feedback, so to say, like, what do you think? No, I'm not asking you, what do you think? I'm telling you what I found out, and I'll share the knowledge with you. So it's really about how you paint the picture. And I kind of got that feedback from people after the podcast, that little saying of painting the picture really stuck to them. And so I just wanted to mention that here, that, it's really how you tell the story. And yes, we need to really educate parents and families, and also those people who are not at all, do not have any association with anybody from the LGBTQ. So with that, I recently talked to a friend of mine who's from Pakistan, and she's Muslim. She's been a kind of away from us, so it has taken me time to get to her. And when I told her about it, she listened, and then first thing she says, well, how did the brother take it? How did your dad take it? My dad lives with us. she asked me like 2, 3 other people, like how did they take it? And I told her very positively. And then she quickly got on board. It's almost like she would have gone the other way if I told her, well, I don't know, but this has been difficult. I'm sure her reaction would have been different if I said those things. And she was ready to share with people and spread the word and help us in our mission to educate people. I just wanted to make these comments. And I do some work here in Michigan, so if any of you have anybody in Michigan, please, through Aruna, get my information. And I facilitate a support group for parents for transgender youth. And there's several other things happening here. So thank you so much for listening to me. And thank you, everybody, for sharing what you have shared.
Thank you, Tejinder. Tejinder does extraordinary work in the Michigan area, Detroit area, she said. And she and her son have just actually been part of a podcast that is really informative and a really loving portrayal of a family that goes on this journey when the kid comes out as trans. So I'll be posting that shortly, so everybody will get a chance to hear that. I did actually, and now that I'm thinking about the issue, I'm also wondering whether any of you can address the experience of transgender or gender non-conforming Muslims, because I think our communities have a different attitude towards sexual orientation and a different attitude towards gender identity. So I'm wondering whether you have anything to share about how specifically the South Asian Muslim community reacts to trans or gender non-conforming Muslims.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I'm honestly curious, and I want to ask you guys a question as I kind of make some statements. So growing up here, right, I was kind of raised to loop the trans and non-binary community. I mean, there was no non-binary community. My parents didn't even know. To this day, they barely understand it. But they kind of grouped them together. But when I went to Pakistan, I saw hijras everywhere. And while there might not be, the most well-treated minority, I was surprised at how openly they walked and how people seemed to just casually treat them like they were part of the scenery, like they're just part of the culture. So I kind of wonder, would they is the framing of the hijras similar enough that we could superimpose that on the West to Desi parents, the old generation, that kind of has this foothold upon our lives and things like that? Like, is that possible? What's your thoughts on that? Do you think geography has a lot to do with how we perceive gender in the Muslim or Desi community? Because I know India, among Sikhs and Hindus, they also have hijras, and I know I've met homophobic Sikhs and Hindus. But again, hijras are there as well. So how do we see, what is the reality of those two different realities?
Anyone want to respond?
Nadia, are you trying to speak? Sorry.
I can take a stab at it because I kind of grew up in India and was exposed to the Hijra community in terms of the ease of acceptance of their existence is there's a space for them to exist in the Indian diaspora, in the Desi diaspora, be it in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, any of those countries that kind of, whatever we call them, the subcontinent. But just because there's an acceptance of their existence doesn't mean that we accept their inclusion. So there is a reality that they exist, and but there's also a reality that we don't like their existence per se. We tolerate them because we have created a space where we can use their services in terms of cheap entertainment or dancing when you have a child being born, where they come and they dance for your entertainment and you give them some money, make yourself feel good that you're helping a marginalized group in society, or give them some money while you're standing at a traffic light if they surround you, because we transcribe to the view that if a hijra gives you badwa or says something negative, then that really has like some kind of a black magical power to it. So you want to avoid being on the wrong side of those people. So there's this very easy acceptance of their right to maybe be alive as long as they don't intrude into your space too much. And if they do, if they're allowed to come into your spaces, it's most of the time on your terms as a, you know, as I guess the ruling class of society, whatever we might be, with very cisgender roles assigned to us that we follow. But there's this false narrative that Indian culture has a acceptance of transgenderism because we have some gods in the Hindu mythology that have transgender identities. So all said and done, there's, you know, there are there's myths and stories of divinity in transgender roles. There's also stories of divinity in feminine roles, but we all know how that goes in India as well. So there is a Durga and a Shakti and all that is well and good, and Lakshmi and Saraswati and all these goddesses that you worship that are female, but when it actually comes to women getting power and love and wealth and education, it's the reality is very far removed. So yes, the hijras do exist in Pakistan. It's a similar thing. In most places, they are abused and are barbarically treated to all kinds of sexual violence as sex slaves or even prostitution, in which they are very powerless. So that is the reality of the reality back home. Somehow this the Western world, whatever we might call it, America, is kinder to trans people, even with its harshness and brutality, versus the flamboyant existence of hijras on the streets of India and Pakistan, which looks more accepting, but it is far worse in terms of any humanity. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Oh, no, that makes perfect sense. And nothing you said was wrong. I mean, you were right about everything. But I do notice that if you compare it to sexuality, there is, I mean, it's terrible because, I mean, I kind of hold the third world on a different standard, unfortunately. I shouldn't say that, unfortunately, than the Western world. But it seems that there's more acceptance for that than sexuality, because I've never seen anybody in Pakistan admit they're gay. But then you'll see people talk not with a lot less venom towards the hijras, even though they are also still marginalized and treated terribly, and yes, treated worse than they are in North America. But I've noticed a slight difference in that. Like, I've noticed an attitudinal difference. I noticed they seem to prefer one over the other in sexuality versus gender. That's kind of all I kind of felt.
Yep. Adil, to that question, that's actually a very good question. Is it okay if I speak?
Please, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Very good. I think a lot of South Asian communities in America are more uptight about LGBT issues than they are in Pakistan. So, for example, I've lived there for years. There is, I believe this was passed in 2013 or 14, around that time, where a transgender person can identify as the third gender on the identification card in Pakistan. It was the first Muslim country to allow that to happen, and I am, the existence is there, but the inclusion is not there. And the existence is there with a lot of limitations. So the existence is there when we say hijra or gender non-binary. Hijra would translate into either gender non-binary or trans in different communities differently. the existence is there, but the existence is very limited because you see mostly transgender women. Even for the Women's March that happened on March 8th this month, if you look at the pictures online, you would see plenty of transgender women leading the march in different parts of Pakistan, but you don't see any transgender male. How that raises a concern that how likely is it for a woman to come out as a trans man in a very male-dominant society. And then the second part of it, inclusion, that I mentioned, I am in alignment with what Hamida said. My grandparents have had a transgender person come in and perform for over 35 years. The same transgender person that performed when my uncle was born, and then the same transgender person performed at his wedding 25 years later, has had a family relationship with that transgender. But now when we go and talk about that transgender, how much inclusion and acceptance have they received from their family as a person, as a sibling, as a child, which is very, very weak right now. And a lot of South Asian Muslim communities, when it comes to LGBT issues, or it comes to other issues like women in leadership role in among communities and so on, are so uptight because of other influences here in America. So more inclusive, I guess more visible in South Asian culture, South Asian countries, but not so inclusive. And I'm interested to hear how is it in Indo-Caribbean diaspora. Maybe Nadia can speak in regards to that. How is it in the Indo-Caribbean?
Well, in my family, I feel like, in particular, people are very homophobic. It wasn't something I think that they even talked about when I was growing up because there wasn't cultural change. But in Trinidad, Trinidad still had, it was illegal. You could be thrown in jail to be gay until 2 years ago when they finally overturned the old British laws. And since then, there's been a huge sea change where, now schools are trying to teach inclusion, and my older family members are getting very upset about it. My cousins who are very religiously conservative are, also very upset about it. So it's like this sort of coming to a head as
has started,
and social changes are happening. So I think it's hard, but those, I think that there's a generational change that's going on. I mean, I'm, accepting. I really try to be an ally. My sibling, my older brother, is also like, he's very LGBT accepting. And so I think, especially as Desi parents, we have the opportunity to be those aunties and uncles who are, helping to change. And I think the next generation, when I meet young Muslims who are in college, for example, even if they present as very conservative, they tend to be much, much more accepting and much more inclusive than we have seen in the past. I think just because the culture around them and here in America has changed. And so I kind of think, our community is very conformist. If we can get about 50% of people to, or, even a critical mass to say, this is okay, we are accepting, we are inclusive, I think everyone else might just go along with it because it's we have a very communalist culture. So if we have mosque communities that are inclusive, that are accepting, that are bringing people in, if we start to really bring that out, I think it, the same way that American culture has changed and become more loving and inclusive, I think we can also do it definitely with American Desi culture. So I think we just, in some ways, we have to look to the next generation to make some of these changes, as well as to positive examples from the past.
Can I ask a question?
I had one. Yeah, sure. I had one comment to Adil's point about more accepting of transgenderism, and this thought just crossed my mind. Because somehow, versus being very homophobic. So we like in Desi communities are very homophobic, but somehow a little more accepting of hijras. One of the reasons is because somehow they believe that homosexuality has a choice component to it, versus transgenderism. They believe that this person was born with an extra, sexual appendage, or which they didn't control. So they have this idea that transgender people somehow are more born this way versus homosexuals who kind of choose to be homosexual. So that could be one of the reasons of a slightly more open attitude, at least in some niches, in some niche spaces for the transgender community, that this idea that they were born this way biologically and they did not have a choice. They had to be hijras because they have, maybe an ovary where they're not supposed to,
right,
or something like that.
Yeah, and I think here actually the issue is that people confuse being transgender with being intersex. So
Exactly.
Intersex is actually, being intersex is a much more rarer condition where, the child is actually born with, difference in sexual organs. But being transgender is really like more about what's in the heart rather than,
exactly.
What's in the leg.
But that differentiation, that knowledge is still not there as much. So they just think of it as a biological intersex. They confuse the two terms. So for them, they're just, born intersex versus the idea that a woman could actually be born in a male's body with all womanly parts that are completely functioning biologically, and she could be a perfect biological female, but still not identify with the female gender, is just something that is incomprehensible yet.
Right. And I think, there are
maybe one day they'll understand.
Yeah, there are several interesting things that all of you brought up here. Khalid brought up the fact that it's basically trans people who present as female who are the ones who are actually commonly seen in South Asian culture. And, the various things that Hamida talked about, the difference being between intersex and, or the assumption that this is a biological reality as opposed to anything else. But I think Adil really hit on something here while asking, is there a strategy that we in the West, as part of the Desi diaspora, can use that comes from our cultural background? And we all understand that the lot of trans people of hijras in South Asia is not great. They're so marginalized. They are subjected to a lot of abuse, but there still is a space. So the question I think Adil asked was like, is there a way for us to use these cultural traditions to in some way increase the visibility and provide more space for folks in our diaspora? And I think that's a fantastic conversation to have. Unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our hour, and we could go into a 2-hour discussion, but I think that may be like a little bit taxing. So I'd actually like to ask if people would like to sort of go around and sort of, make some closing comments about, first of all, the conversation that we just had, what you thought was really, important that we all discussed and touched upon, and what do you think future steps are. And I would love to see another call come up where we could talk about some of these issues and maybe really like focus on strategy. And I think all of you are real experts in this area. So how can we sort of work within our communities to make acceptance a reality for everybody? Anybody like to go ahead? Nadia, maybe?
Yeah, I can go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope that we're going to continue to do positive, inclusive, and affirming programming with Muslims with Progressive Values. We typically meet the first Friday of every month, and we might be switching to virtual meetings for a while. And we have had, we have different speakers. One thing I think that we haven't had is we haven't had anyone from the trans community speak. Is that real? And we should think about doing something inclusive like that, maybe during the month of Pride would be nice to do, or even before. So that I think we're going to keep trying to sort of promote a very positive and inclusive Muslim message to all of our brothers and sisters, however they identify, and sort of try to continue to bring that message out and have a space that really is a safe space.
Thanks, Nadia. Hamida, you want to go ahead?
I actually have been forced to kind of create a space for conversations about uh, LGBTQ issues, even in my home, because my daughter, who's 14, has a friend who has two friends actually, who have gender identity issues that they're grappling with during their very formative teenage years. And I have had to open myself up to having these conversations with her. And after some of my reactions or my body language shocked and awed my 14-year-old, who was very judgmental, and decided to kind of school me on how normal it is for a friend to be Sam one day, but feel like Sasha the next day, and me making a trivial joke as to are we picking up Sam today or is it going to be Sasha, and being schooled on it's none of your business. It's my friend. Whoever comes into the car, it's fine. We know. She'll let you know, or he'll let you know if she's having, if she's, Sam, if she feels like Sam, she'll introduce you, she'll say hi, and you'll know. Or if it's Sasha, she'll know. And so, being forced into these conversations and confronting your own hidden biases by your children kind of forces you to come up with strategies on how you can have these conversations, which I still don't know what would have been a good reaction. And I realized, and I've sent out these little innocuous WhatsApp messages in my little girls groups of primarily Desi women, and have received similar experiences from them. So I know that there is a conversation that needs to be had, and hopefully I can I aim to try to bring these conversations out in the open with my girlfriends, not as big a scale as MPV, which is more public scale, but having these side conversations in our monthly book club meetings, or at our girls' night outs, and so that's how I try to kind of effect a change in myself, and hopefully that small little thing will start a dialogue, and that's what I hope to do on my side.
Thank you, Hamida, and that's a wonderful lesson for all of us on allyship in our daily lives, which is really.
You must be an excellent mother, Hamida.
Yeah. My son hates me, and he's 20, but that's okay. He'll realize it someday.
No, he doesn't.
Kandil is our therapist, and without a copay.
Yeah, Adil, you want to go ahead with your closing remarks and any summary you have of our conversation?
Kandil or Adil?
Either one. I said Adil, but that's fine.
So Kandil? Or so should I mute my mic or?
Adil, go ahead.
Oh, okay. The one thing I'm wondering is, as long as it's well understood, I think intersection from third wave feminism actually, I think it's a very helpful thing, because to allude to what Nadia was talking about before, how she meets like really conservative looking like Muslim men and women who are just kind of like, they don't regurgitate the stuff they hear at the masjid. And I wonder if that education in the university system, or even just them being marginalized and then having their allies being, LGBTQ people, feminists, black rights activists, and they see these people are standing in solidarity with them because they're now marginalized under Trump and post 9/11 and things like that. So I wonder if knowing that there's an intersection of oppression, if that's actually helped a lot, and if that's something we could continue to push. And that's my hope. The second thing I wanted to say is it's kind of dark, but it is kind of hopeful. I noticed, for instance, in my city, the masjids are controlled by old conservative men, but their children are not. The immigrants coming in might be conservative, but their children are not. So if the old guard kind of just dies off, kind of like in America, these old white people voting for Trump, that's a little bit of a generalization, but you know what I mean. That if it's the same thing that's going to happen in the Muslim community, where when the youth finally takes over, we're going to see a major cultural shift and a new zeitgeist. That's it. That's all.
Hear, hear, Adil. That's so optimistic. Love it.
Yeah. Kandil, you want to go ahead?
Sure. First of all, yeah, wrapping up this call, these are very healthy conversations to have, and I'm very thankful to you, Runaka, for having us, and Desi Rainbow Parents and Allies to be working with us. I think back when we worked the first time together, it was for the Boston Mela, which is like this big South Asian event, and we worked with Desi Parents, Desi Rainbow Parents and Allies, and it was a great experience. And since then, I've been connected, and it's very nurturing. I think what our community is doing, you know, to be an active ally for LGBT folks is to have more inclusive events by having prayers that are not gender segregated. So that in itself is a huge thing, right? A lot of traditionalist Muslim communities where people are just segregated by gender, you know, oftentimes folks that are going through either gender transition, non-binary or trans, you know, they often find no space in those, you know what I mean, because they're very gender segregated. So in our community, there is no gender segregation. Folks stand wherever they feel comfortable standing. And also, as a community of faith, when we do have prayers, we're not too big on prayers, but whenever we do have prayers, congregations, it's not just inclusive, but it's also affirming of LGBT identified folks and especially progressive Muslim women in the community. So I think our way of doing this work is to continue to have spaces where people come in and learn that LGBT folks, or LGBT Muslims, or LGBT Desi people are just like them, you know, in so many different ways. Their gender identity, their sexual orientation is a part of their identity. It's not everything about them. When we started, we were 18 people, and now 2 years later, this community has over 200 people. And we are very active. We have monthly events, and as a gay Muslim man, I'm very well respected. We have folks that are queer identified and everything. I think we continue to do this work, and it would continue to grow, and we'll have great parents parents and siblings like Hamida and Nadia, and allies like Adil, who are willing to speak up about these things. And these are not just limited to these safe spaces. So from my personal experience, I know we're running out of time here, just 30 seconds, is that I've been to spaces that were safe spaces, but rainbow-only spaces, only LGBT spaces. So what I realized is that a lot of Muslims that were comfortable sharing a part of their identity there, but in their day-to-day life, the situations are different. Whether they probably, many people they don't think they have they're not ready to come out yet, or they don't think that they have the privilege to come out yet, and stuff like that. Contributing these conversations outside of these events, or just to even engage in the conversation with people at like a dinner table, girls' night out, or a family dinner, just to educate people about these things is very important. And having the conversation, making it healthy. And I was so surprised in these last 2 years of advocacy work that how supportive MPD Boston has been in making the space more inclusive for LGBT folks. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, all of you. You have been pretty phenomenal in terms of, first of all, sharing your own stories and personal viewpoints, and in talking about resources for the community. I think this is a conversation that needs to be continued, and all of you have said that, in terms of there are ways that all of us can work together to just kind of make the LGBTQ community a part of our community, not separate, not marginalized, not outside. So I think everything that MPV is doing now is helping make that happen, and I hope we can continue working together to do this. So to all of you, Adil, Hamida, Kandil, Nadia, thank you so much. I'm going to be posting, the MPV website on our social media, and plus any other links or information that you can send that people can access. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a safe Sunday. I hope you're all safe and your families are safe at this difficult time. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Aruna. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Aruna.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.